Don't get me wrong, the employees were great, but they added no value. There were no checks and balances making the employers actually do their job. I didn't even have verification that I was getting submitted for positions, something that this government entity could have had legitimate oversight and a positive enforcement position, but instead I'm the one that got all the focus. It was shameful and a waste that the employment office couldn't enforce actual employment on the employer's end. Could have been a perfect closed-loop system with the disability office. Would have really justified the numbers and training that they got. A job was open, you immediately got prioritized and fitted with a job. Nobody internal getting moved around for their own convenience. Companies having to actually have roads to leadership for their internal employees instead of screwing all the unemployed people by pretending jobs were actually open to externals. No positions opening and closing for no reason, inflating employment numbers. Employers actually having to obey the law to external facing positions filled by external candidates. What a novel idea. Then, if your health deteriorated or you got unemployed again, it'd all be captured and you could be taken care of by your money that you had been putting in, not having it all stolen and rolled into something else that benefited some idiot's pet project that got some other idiot into office that didn't employ anyone who had a viable business. How many ugly steel statue companies do we need in every city after all? If there were viable businesses, they should have been able to survive on the private side as well. Seems simple. There were plenty of ways the government could have been limited in scope and legitimately help people. Imagine if everyone had been employed before farming positions to other countries. Imagine working at your job for a while and actually being able to get a raise. Imagine getting a steady stream of net ads that were based off need instead of market speculation and fear. Imagine getting paid on your value instead of on a curve of everyone else's perceived worth, when the majority of them add absolutely nothing because they've never had to. The deadbeats never did get let go, I mused to myself. The pitiful excuses sat and festered, collecting their checks, adding no value, driving the valuable employees away that carried them daily. I'd call them viruses. Nobody ever did anything about them. They took up so many good jobs that good people could have been working. Instead, it felt like a giant subsidy where only the jerks maintained employment while everyone else got left out in the cold. It wasn't the top percentage that screwed everyone. It was the jerks that were parked at their jobs, refusing to contribute. They should never have gotten bumped up. They were mediocre at best, providing value for a few hours a week at most. I'd worked as much as I could, but I needed breaks, and I couldn't work as much. I provided 20 times the output per week as them, but they had their butts in their chairs, so they always looked better to the manager that conveniently put them there. Butts in chairs and boots on the ground were the mottos chanted until the meetings had all but been lost. Upper management demanded everyone to be robots or get flushed for someone who could and would. Output wasn't measured at all, only perceived, and perception was reality. Zero checks and balances to performance, quality, and objective goals. Success was expected and failure was swiftly punished for all to see. Learning was unacceptable. No risk, only playing it safe. Once you were unemployed, nobody saw you, and you essentially ceased to exist. No emails returned, stuck in an unemployment loop that was virtually impossible to escape. The rich people weren't to blame. It was the garbage and waste that had infested the middle, and there was no oversight of any of it. Not that it needed a ton, but limited oversight would have gone a long way, instead of forcing the focus on the symptoms. Sort of like how the DMV worked, or post office. You went in there and you did your little thing and you were gone. No overstepping boundaries. They simply minded their own business and did their own thing. It was much the same way Customs and Border Protection worked. You left them alone, they left you alone. No overstepping. Good people doing good work. Limited, but helpful work. They weren't like an internal black ops police force that was accountable to no one, picking on the little guy and ignoring the gigantic festering root causes. They all had some good people working for them, but leadership refused to close the loop on any of their systems. They'd implemented the law and never followed up. There'd finally be a good law, and all it would do is create a new form for everyone to pencil whip. Seriously, how hard would it be if you had to create an external position per the law to actually have to fill it with an external candidate? What a scam. I resolved, having spun my mental wheels for long enough. With my mind rant over, I looked around more, thankfully not seeing any stupid, ugly steel sculptures. There hadn't been any threats, but I kept looking for threats as long as I could. There were none, though. The raiders had all since given up due to their lack of fuel and vanished. It wasn't long before I drifted off. There were weird flashes in my mind of hill people, forcing people to sit on carts in sets of 3. We were being offered the chance to, if we completed the trial, we would get some good loot. Anyone who didn't complete it got butchered and killed as part of the trials that the next group would have to watch. I volunteered and sat in the left seat. A box was put over my head and I could see only out a tiny slit. We'd only been able to see the entrance, not anything inside. Upon entering, it was essentially sheer hell. People being butchered alive with executioner's axes, blood everywhere. Room after room, gore from floor to ceiling, horrific screaming from every direction. You had to sit there and simply endure the horror. The two to my right completely lost it, and I was panicking as well. I kicked and screamed to myself, internally in my head, barely awake, enough to stop the dream. I thought for a second in my subconscious and didn't realize why I was panicking. I supposed it was because I felt the danger so near. In a weird twist, I got a second chance as the dream seemed to reset, as my head gently bumped against my helmet down the bumpy road. They put the box on my head and we sat through the course again. This time I couldn't wake up, and there didn't seem to be an end to the brutal gore rooms. I told them I was done and they let me go. I reported back to the team my analysis of the gore maze and we left. I woke up to the gentle, peaceful bumping of my head in my cozy helmet. I looked around and everyone seemed to be fine, so I didn't say anything and took a sip of my water. Every time I blinked, I saw flashes of the gore-filled rooms. Then we'd drive by a farm of people preparing their soil, looking at us suspiciously. Don't worry, I thought to myself, we aren't here to raid all your stuff. Inevitably, these people must be bringing all their goods to the trading post. I thought these people could really use the fuel also. All of their equipment must be getting low on fuel right now. They had cows pulling plows through their gardens. It was quite mesmerizing. Nearly all of them had vast underground tanks of fuel that they always had in storage, but the problem was that they were the only ones. Underground and above ground fuel tanks were so heavily regulated that unless you were a farm with a specific purpose, it was virtually impossible to get the deluge of permits required. After I had a second to think about it, some of the trucking yards had big fuel tanks also, as well as some of the local businesses, but it was nearly more hassle than it was worth. I made a mental note to myself that these people needed to be prioritized, some of the first fuel if I had a choice in the matter. Imagine all the great discussions we could have and people we could meet, rolling up in huge fuel trucks, I thought. I was about to say something when we rolled up to a roadblock. Were we on the Puyallup perimeter already? I wondered. There was some light discussion in the lead car to some folks on guard duty, and then they let us pass through. We all gave them some thumbs up as we rolled through. This wasn't Puyallup yet. We must have been passing through the outskirts, though. This community must have been able to survive due to being buffered by the Puyallup tribe, I wondered. Everything else in the area had been wiped out by gang activity that wasn't localized to the city-state. The local military bases had all been since emptied and equipment caravaned east to safety. So you can understand then why it was somewhat confusing that after some twists and turns and driving aways, we came to a very military-style checkpoint. We came to a halt as a tank turret angled at us. No sudden movements came over our internal comms. I let out a nervous laugh, and my buddy thought it was awesome, and I sighed. To give me even more of a hard time, he patted me on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry." Someone in the front said, "New security measures, I see." Our lead vehicle must have gone through a long-distance check, and then soon after, we pulled forward. We drove for a short distance and stopped, and then I saw people at their window talking. They walked by all of us to check us out, and I waved without thinking. Relieved that my sudden movement didn't startle them, I put my hand down. My friend smacked my shoulder and gave me a hard time again. "Relax, you goof." "I'm never relaxed," I responded, and that made him laugh, which was okay. We waited for a little bit, and the turret stopped pointing at us, which helped to calm things down. Eventually, a four-wheel drive pulled up to the gate, and the gate raised, and we went through.